Hello, my name is Taylor Alexander, and today I'll be presenting the comparative life systems of Ascaris and Peziza fungus. So first off, let's talk about Ascaris and Peziza's respective classifications. So for Ascaris, its kingdom is Animalia. Its phylum is Nematoda, which is the general classification of roundworms. Its class is Chromadoria. Members of this class have spiral aphids and live in wet conditions. So their aphids are the little ridges on their skin, and that helps them stick to the intestinal wall of their host. Its order is Ascardida, which means that its offspring will spread through feces and into soil. Its family is Ascardidae, which means that is an intestinal roundworm, and its genus is Ascaris, which is just the classification of giant roundworms. For Peziza, its kingdom is fungi. Its phylum is Asympcota, which means that it's a sac fungi. So it produces this thing called an ascus, which is a sac, and it shoots its sex spores out of that sac. Its class is a pizomycete. This class, their spores are normally disc-like. Its order is Pezizales, which means that it's a fleshy fungus. Common funguses of this order include like morels and truffles. Its family is a Peziskae, which means that it's a cup-shaped mushroom, and its genus is Peziza. So reproduction of Ascaris, first I'll talk about the general anatomy. So males are a bit smaller than females, ranging from about 15 to 30 centimeters in length. The distinction between the two can be seen in the curvature of the tail. I don't know if you can tell, but this would be a straight tail and this would be a sharply curved tail, signifying that it's a male. The female are larger, and they're usually range from about 20 to 40 centimeters in length. The female, unlike the male, have a straight tail and have no external sex organs or differentiating features. However, they can be didelphic, which means that they have two sets of reproductive female organs. So how Ascaris procreate? The male produces sperm in the testes, and then it travels through the vas deferens, and then it goes into the seminal vesicle and goes through the cloaca, which connects to the intestines, and then is ejected through the seminal vesicle, where it then meets with the vaginal pore of the female worm, sorry. And then from there, a egg is fertilized with ova, and it's incubated in the uterus. And after this, the female worm will lay about 100,000 fertilized eggs, which is quite a bit. And the eggs will mature in about 4 weeks. So reproduction of Peziza. So first I'll talk about the sexual anatomy of Peziza. As mentioned earlier, it is a sac fungi. So when it reproduces sexually, it forms an ascus, which is these little things. And like I said, it's a sac that allows the spores, or in this case, ascospores, to be ejected from the surface of the mushroom. This would be the surface shooting out. Peziza, much like many other sexually producing fungi, actually have no specific sex or sex-specific organs. So as you can see, it's like a male and female kind of situation. And often they actually are identified through reproduction by the plus or minus compatibility. That's just how scientists kind of specify it. The first phase of reproduction occurs in, as mentioned before, when mature ascospores are released into the air from the ascus. Then the ascospores find their respective positive or negative compatible mate and then begin to exchange genetic information through plasmology. This is where the two spores literally form a bridge between them and share genetic material. From there, they form a dikaryotic hyphae, which eventually branches to become a mycelia. The mycelia will become a larger mycelium, and which is the underground network of the fungus. This eventually will produce a fruiting body, which is the ascocarp, which is the actual like above ground part of the fungus. From there, the fungus produces an ascus, which holds the original zygote of the hyphae. The zygote undergoes meiosis twice and then finally mitosis. And by the end of this process, the ascus will hold 8 mature ascospores. So that's what these little round things are, and there's 8 of them. On the other hand, when Peziza reproduce asexually, they produce asexual spores called conidia and mature on conidophores, which are little branches that incubate the zygote. Then the conidia detach and are, when they are mature enough to form their own mycelium colonies. So then they'll be ejected similar to the ascospores in the ascus. So a reproductive compare and contrasting of these two. So obviously they both have the ability to enact sexual reproduction. However, Ascaris relies on male and female sexual gametes and organs. However, Peziza is pretty much void of these specific reproductive practices, has no defined sex organs, and has the ability to reproduce asexually. So life cycle of Ascaris. Ascaris is a parasitic worm that lives in the intestine of mammals. It begins as its life as larvae and is created through human feces. If this feces gets into agricultural soils, the eggs can actually lie dormant for many years and the food yielded from the area will be contaminated. And if that food is not cooked or cleaned properly, the eggs will hatch in the host's small intestine. When the young worms are ready to reproduce, then they will go up through the veins into the lungs. They will then incubate there before they are coughed up and swallowed by the host. Pretty gross. Then they make their way back into the intestines for breeding. This process in humans is called ascariasis, which is very common in humans and swine. It also is more common in hotter, wetter parts of the world because the worms live more ideally in those conditions. It also outbreaks in areas with less rigorous sanitation practices, so maybe somewhere where it could be common to use the bathroom outside, as opposed to an indoor plumbing system that would eliminate any chance of cross-contamination between feces and agricultural soils. And as mentioned before, it is a parasite, however, it is mostly non-lethal. So the life cycle of Peziza. Peziza thrives off of commensalism, which is a relationship between two organisms where one benefits and the other is not benefited or damaged. So in this scenario, the fungi feeds on decay material and the decay material is not harmed or benefited. This organism is serophobic, sorry. So that means that Peziza respirates anaerobically. As mentioned before, it begins life as a spore and is transported usually by wind or other organisms. It then spends most of its life as a hyphae underground, which, as mentioned before, is this little germinated spore. Then it spends the rest of its life basically spreading and creating this fruiting body. After the fruit has exacerbated in its reproductive uses, the fungi will die and decompose. So comparative life cycles. So something that I found similar to these is that, similar to each other, was that they are reliant on other organisms for survival. The Peziza, on one hand, uses organisms in the area, wind, whatever it may be, to transport its spores so it can mate and create more generations. Whereas Ascaris, obviously, it incubates in humans, and then when humans defecate somewhere, that's how it spreads and creates more generations and is spread to other hosts. The differences that I found is that they prefer opposite conditions. Ascaris prefers humid and hot conditions versus Peziza prefers arid and cool conditions, usually in Northern Europe. Ascaris is a parasite and Peziza is a commensalist organism, so it does not harm anything that's living off of. So nutrition of Ascaris. Ascaris is an endoparasite, which basically means that it cannot break down macromolecules for digestion. That is why it incubates in a host. So the host's digestive systems will break down these macromolecules, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, etc., into these monomers that are then digestible for the parasite. So essentially saying that the enzymes within the cell that would be digesting the peripheral polymers, whatever you want to call it, it cannot leave the cell. So it needs smaller monomers to enter the cell to be able to digest it. Something that's significant about this, which I kind of think is, I guess, symbolic for its nature, is that the digestive system goes the entire length of the body, which I find to be because this worm's basically only like reason for you know, living is to mate and obviously to eat enough, to live long enough to create another generation as being a parasite. So nutrition of Peziza. It absorbs nutrients through the mycelium. So what actually it will do is it will sound out a hypha, which contains exoenzymes, which will go out into the surrounding dirt, soil, decay material, whatever, and take these macromolecules. It doesn't need to break them down. It brings them into the cell and then breaks them down. So it's an exo process versus an endo process. Like I said, it's an external digestive system. So it's breaking down those molecules, bringing them back in by sending out enzymes, and stores energy in the form of glycogen, which is a fat. So nutrition. Both of these are heterotrophs, so they both rely on other organisms to create its own energy. However, Peziza is a decomposer, whereas Ascaris is a parasite. And obviously, they have very different enzymatic processes for digestion. One is endoenzymatic, which basically means that its enzymes cannot leave the cell. It needs another organism to break down those big macromolecules, versus Peziza, which uses exoenzymes, so it can break down those macromolecules on the outside and bring them back in. Thank you.